Roy Clark was one of those rare performers who seemed to do everything with ease. Whether it was a guitar, banjo, fiddle, or mandolin, he could pick up almost any instrument and make it sound alive within seconds. People who saw him perform often described it as something almost magical, because he didn't just play music, he brought joy into it. On television and live stages, he had a warm smile, quick humor, and a natural charm that made audiences feel comfortable and entertained at the same time. He became one of the most recognizable faces in country music, especially during the golden age of variety shows. But even though the world saw him as a cheerful and talented entertainer, there was always a deeper side to his life that most fans never fully understood. Behind the applause, behind the bright lights, and behind the laughter, Roy Clark lived a life filled with pressure, responsibility, and personal struggles that were not always visible to the public. Fame gave him success, but it also placed him under constant expectations to perform, to stay relevant, and to always be at his best. Over time, this created a contrast between the joyful man audiences saw on screen and the private individual who had to manage the weight of a long and demanding career. It is this contrast that makes his life story so interesting, because it shows that even the most talented and admired people can have hidden layers that only appear when you look closely at their journey. Roy Clark was born on April 15, 1933, in a small place called Meherrin, Virginia. He was raised in a large family with several siblings, and his early life was shaped by both simplicity and struggle. His father worked as a tobacco farmer, but music was also an important part of his household. His mother played piano, and his father also had musical skills, playing instruments like the banjo, fiddle, and guitar. This early exposure to music played a very important role in shaping Roy's future. Even though at the time, no one could have predicted how far he would go. During his childhood, his family moved several times, partly because of financial difficulties during the Great Depression. These moves took him from Virginia to New York, and later to Washington, D.C. Each new place brought different experiences, and although moving often can be difficult for a child, it also helped Roy adapt quickly to new environments and people. Music became a constant in his life, something that remained steady even when everything else was changing around him. One of his earliest instruments was not even a real professional one. It was a homemade cigar box guitar with a simple neck attached, which he used during his school years. Despite its simplicity, it was enough to spark his interest in playing music. By the time he was a teenager, his father began teaching him more serious instruments, including the guitar. From there, Roy's skills grew rapidly, and he soon learned multiple instruments, including the banjo and mandolin. What stood out about him, even at a young age, was not just his ability to play, but how quickly he learned and how naturally music seemed to come to him. As Roy Clark grew older, music slowly transformed from a childhood interest into a serious path that would define his entire life. By his teenage years, he was already performing and gaining attention for his skills. Unlike many musicians who focus on one instrument, Roy developed the rare ability to master several, which made him stand out in every performance. His talent was not limited to playing notes correctly. He had a natural rhythm, timing, and emotional connection with music that made his performances feel alive. When he played, it didn't feel mechanical or practiced. It felt like storytelling through sound. This ability opened doors for him in the entertainment world, and he began appearing in clubs, small shows, and eventually larger stages. Over time, his reputation grew, and people started recognizing him as more than just a musician. He was becoming an entertainer, someone who can engage an audience not only with music, but also with humor and personality. This combination became his signature style. In an industry where many performers struggle to connect with audiences, Roy had a natural gift for making people feel like they were part of the show. However, as his career grew, so did the pressure. Being constantly in the public, I meant that he had to maintain a certain image at all times. Success brought opportunities, but also brought expectations that required constant energy and focus. Behind the scenes, this kind of lifestyle can be exhausting, even for someone as naturally gifted as Roy Clark. While audiences saw smiles and laughter, the reality of constant travel, performance schedules, and personal sacrifice was a different story that few people truly understood. During the height of his career, Roy Clark became a familiar face in households across America, especially through television. His appearances on variety shows made him a household name, and his performances often left audiences amazed at how effortlessly he could switch between instruments. He was not just performing music. He was creating moments that people remembered. His charm made him relatable, and his humor made him even more popular. But behind the success, there was also a life that required careful balance. Being famous meant that much of his personal time was limited, and privacy became something rare. Even though he was admired by millions, he still had to manage the same personal responsibilities and emotional experiences as anyone else. Relationships, family life, and personal reflection all existed alongside his career, but they often remained out of public view. Over time, this created a separation between his public image and his private reality. People saw the entertainer, but not always the man behind the performance. As years passed, this difference became more noticeable in how fans remembered him after his peak years. When a performer spends decades in the spotlight, their legacy often becomes larger than life, and questions sometimes arise about what their private world was really like. In Roy Clark's case, this curiosity only grew stronger after his passing, as fans and observers began looking back at his life with deeper interest. Stories, memories, and reflections started to resurface, painting a fuller picture of a man who lived much of his life in front of an audience, but still held parts of himself away from public view. After Roy Clark's passing, interest in his personal life increased significantly. Fans who had followed his career for decades began revisiting old interviews, performances, and stories from people who knew him. As often happens with famous figures, attention shifted from his public achievements to the more private aspects of his life. Conversations began to emerge about what he was like away from the stage, how he spent his time when he was not performing, and what memories he left behind for those closest to him. One of the ideas that circulated in discussions and storytelling circles was the notion that there were personal belongings and private spaces that reflected a side of him the public rarely saw. In some retellings of his story, references were made to hidden items, private collections, or unexplored parts of his home life that symbolize his long journey through fame and personal experience. While these stories are often shared in a dramatic or mysterious way, they mainly reflect the natural curiosity people feel when thinking about someone they admired. Fans often want to believe that there are deeper layers to a celebrity's life, hidden meanings behind their belongings, or personal artifacts that reveal who they truly were. In Roy Clark's case, this curiosity became part of how his legacy continued to grow, even after his death. Whether these stories are taken literally or symbolically, they show how deeply people connected with him and how much interest remains in understanding the full picture of his life. Looking back at Roy Clark's journey, it becomes clear that his life was shaped by both extraordinary talent and the realities of long-term fame. He was not only a skilled musician, but also a performer who understood how to connect with people in a meaningful way. His ability to entertain across generations made him a lasting figure in American music history. At the same time, his story also reflects a human side of success, the part that includes pressure, expectations, and private experiences that are not always visible to the public. Like many well-known figures, Roy Clark's legacy is made up of both what people saw on stage and what remained behind closed doors. The curiosity about his personal life, including the more mysterious or lesser-known parts, shows how deeply audiences connect with entertainers even after they are gone. People do not only remember performances, they remember the feeling those performances created. In the end, Roy Clark's life is not just a story about music, but also about the way a person can become larger than life in the public imagination while still remaining human in private. His legacy continues to live on, not only through his recordings and performances, but also through the stories, memories, and questions that still surround him today that, as time passed, Roy Clark's influence in music did not fade. Instead, it quietly settled into the foundation of country music history. Many younger musicians who came after him studied his style, not just to copy his technique, but to understand how he made music feel so natural and full of life. He had a rare ability to combine technical skill with emotional expression, which is something many musicians struggle to balance. His performances often looked effortless, but behind that ease was years of practice, discipline, and a deep understanding of rhythm and melody. What made him even more special was how he could shift between serious music and light humor without breaking the flow of a performance. This made him stand out in a time when many artists focused only on one style of presentation. Even today, clips of his performances continue to circulate online, reminding new audiences of a time when live television variety shows brought musicians directly into people's homes. His legacy is not just preserved in recordings, but in the way he changed expectations for what a country musician could be. He proved that talent alone was not enough. Personality, timing, and connection with the audience were equally important. This combination is what allowed him to remain relevant for so many years. Even as music trends change, Roy Clark's influence remained steady because it was built on fundamentals rather than temporary popularity. His name still appears in conversations about great musicians not only because of what he achieved, but because of how naturally he achieved it, making complex performances look simple and joyful. Beyond his public success, Roy Clark's personal life remained something that many fans were curious about but never fully understood. Like most performers who spend decades in the spotlight, he had to carefully balance his professional identity with his private world. Fame often creates a distance between public perception and personal reality, and Roy was no exception. While audiences saw a cheerful entertainer, his private life included the normal experiences of family, relationships, and personal reflection. However, because he was constantly traveling and performing, much of this remained out of public view. This separation between public and private life often leads to speculation, especially after a celebrity passes away. People begin to search for meaning in small details, personal belongings, and stories shared by those who knew them closely. In Roy Clark's case, this curiosity grew into discussions about what kind of person he was when the stage lights were off. Some remembered him as humble and kind, while others focused on his dedication to music and work ethic. These different perspectives only added to the complexity of his legacy. It is common for public figures to become larger than life after their death, as memories and stories blend together over time. This is not necessarily about uncovering secrets, but about trying to understand a person more fully than what was possible while they were alive. Roy Clark's life invites this kind of reflection because he spent so much of it sharing joy with others, yet still kept parts of his world private. That balance between openness and privacy is part of what makes his story continue to interest people even today, in the years following his passing. Roy Clark's name continued to appear in tributes, documentaries, and discussions about classic country music. His influence remained strong because he represented a style of entertainment that combined skill, warmth, and personality in a way that felt timeless. Many fans who grew up watching him still remember the way he could light up a stage with nothing more than a smile and an instrument in his hands. New audiences, discovering him through digital platforms, often express surprise at how modern and fresh his performances still feel despite being from an earlier era. This ongoing interest shows that true talent does not lose its value over time. Instead, it becomes part of cultural memory. At the same time, discussions about his personal life and hidden moments continue to surface, not because of confirmed mysteries, but because people naturally want to understand a full picture of someone they admire. Human beings are drawn to stories that feel complete, and when someone lives a public life for so long, there's always curiosity about what existed beyond the spotlight. Roy Clark's story fits this pattern perfectly. He was someone who gave so much of himself to his audience, yet still maintained a personal space that was not fully visible to the world. This combination of visibility and privacy creates lasting interest because it leaves room for interpretation and reflection. His legacy continues to grow not only through his achievements, but also through the questions and memories that surround his life. Ultimately, Roy Clark's life is a reminder that behind every famous face is a real human story shaped by time, effort, and personal experience. He was a musician, an entertainer, and a public figure, but he was also someone who lived through the same emotional and personal challenges that many people face in their own lives. What made him special was not only his talent, but the way he used that talent to connect with others and bring joy to millions of people. His journey from a small-town boy with a simple homemade instrument to a nationally recognized performer shows how far passion and dedication can go when combined with opportunity and hard work. Even though much of his life was spent in the public eye, there will always be parts of his story that remain personal, known only to those closest to him. This is not unusual for someone who lives such a long and active career, but it does add depth to how people remember him. His legacy is not defined by a single moment or discovery, but by a lifetime of performances, memories, and emotional connections with his audience. Over time, stories about him continue to evolve, blending fact, memory, and admiration into a larger narrative. And that is what keeps his name alive. Not mystery alone, but the lasting impact of a life devoted to music and connection. Even decades after his most active years on television and live stages, Roy Clark's influence continued to quietly shape how people think about performance and entertainment. Many modern musicians, especially in country and acoustic genres, still draw inspiration from the way he handled an audience. He did not rely on flashy production or complex effects. Instead, he focused on timing, skill, and personality. That combination is harder to copy than it looks, because it requires both technical mastery and a natural understanding of how to connect with people in real time. When Roy performed, he seemed fully present in the moment, reacting to the audience, the music, and the energy of the room. This gave his shows a sense of life that felt unscripted even when they were carefully prepared. In today's world of highly edited performances and digital enhancement, his style feels almost refreshing in its simplicity. People watching his old clips often comment on how real everything feels.